All right, we are live on the Lev Project. My name is Amuna Israel, Solonomics 101, do it yourself, soul improvement expert. This is the Lev Project. I was over here jamming, and it's only because YouTube be bugging out when you play stuff. They want to send you notices, but I was over here listening to James Brown, The Big Payback, jamming. And before that, I was vibing to some Marvin Gaye, What's Going On. And Inner City Blues. I guess that's the vibration that's happening right about now. And so I said, you know what? Let's continue to do what we have been doing, because this is, as I look at all the conversations and just going back in the annals of time, you see that it's a cycle and it's repeated and it's repetitive. And sometimes we think, wow, this is new, only because we've forgotten that it already has been. There's nothing new under the sun. Um, and there's so much things I could say right now. Like Bob says, so much things to say right now. There's so much things to say. I notice when my spirit gets heavy and I don't have the words to express, I just bust out in song. So you definitely please bear with me as I bust out in song as we're reading this. For those who've just joined us, hold on, let me pull it up so I can make sure I can see you guys. We're going to finish off Henry Box Brown. I hear more and more people calling for us to know our history. And praise be to the Most High. Among others who think it's important, you know, that's what we've been doing this whole time. And before this and after this is to get in contact so that we don't be so reactive. There's so much going on, like I said, right now. And there's so much things to say. But I'm the type I like to watch and observe, because we're the type of people who, you know, we're very reactive. We're very emotional. Our emotions run really high. There's so much going on, like I said, right now. Our reactions run very high, and rightfully so, because it's a trauma that has been, you know, re-injured time and time again. But at some point in this narrative, we have to step back and take a look at what's really happening for what it really is. But I'll speak about that at another space and time as I continue to meditate. You know, one thing about the world of social media, and even your life in general, period, is that the things we let out of our face, out of our mouth, you can't put back in it. And so a wise person meditates. Sometimes I've seen people who are so reactionary, like, and understandable, you're so upset, you're so reactionary that, bomb, you know, this one police officer I saw, she was just so upset. She got to the point where she said what she needed to say, and rightfully so. But I'm not sure if she considered whether or not saying that would mean that you would now be suspended. You know what I'm saying? And so when you analyze the entire thing, there's a time to speak and there's a time to be still, and not saying that you know, not speaking out, but not speaking out. Let me see how am I trying to say this. A lot of people are just speaking out because they think that you're gonna get street cred for speaking out. Let me just say that. And it's the way you're speaking out, and the fact that you can very well be doing more damage than good for the situations, because you have yet to know what the root cause of these situations are. And the reality is that these situations happen all the time. It's not to become numb to it, the reality. It's to say, okay, how am I really going to deal with this really? Like, for real, for real? You understand what I'm saying? And that's my thoughts as I'm looking and seeing everything. Because the reality is, if you're dealing with it on certain levels, you wouldn't even be talking about dealing with it. And I hope everybody got that. If you're dealing with what's going on in your household, in your community, there's certain things you will talk about to the whole entire world, and then there's some things you will not. And these are some of the wise principles that we need to employ in this day and time. Not saying that we don't need to really consider and have dialogue, but, you know, I'm just questioning some of the way in which we choose to do it. It's like everybody's screaming to the choir, basically, and we need to begin to enact things that are going to allow things to move on other realms. But with that said, like I said, I'll come back at another time. I'm gonna finish up Henry Box Brown. The last time I read Henry Box Brown, I said I was gonna come right back, but the last time I read Henry Box Brown, some crazy wild stuff happened to me. And then you know, I saw the last stream was 10 days ago. It was last week before last Thursday. And it was crazy right after I came out for reading it. I don't know. So I had to drop back a little bit and assess some things. And so now we're back to definitely finish it up. So I want to thank everybody who just joined us. And I'm going to go ahead and get right up into Henry Box Brown at this time. Again, this is our history. Why is it important? Because we're going to continue to understand what system. You see, they might have changed the way in which things are done, but the people, the spirit, the attitude, the mentality is still the same. Only thing is, our forefathers who may have been in this Western Hemisphere, on this continent of North America, they would have seen it for what it was and what it is. And we're kind of a little bit shocked because we have this expectation that's not really rooted in reality based on the history. But again, if we forgot the history, then of course we delude ourselves. So again, we're up to the last chapter. I don't know why the thing keeps doing that, but it's all good. We're up to the last chapter. I hope everybody can hear me. Let me go ahead and check. And we're up to chapter 8. I had a long while been a member of the choir in Ephevi Church in Richmond, but after the severe family affliction to which I had just alluded in the last chapter, and the knowledge that these cruelties were perpetuated by ministers and church members, I began strongly to suspect the Christianity of the slaveholding church members, and hesitated much about maintaining my connection with them. The suspicion of these slave-dealing Christians was the means of keeping me absent from all their churches from the time that my wife and children were torn from me. And if you missed last chapter, you know, the man wanted money. He was like, yo, I don't have any money for you. The man was like, I'm gonna get money I want, money I'm gonna get. He goes to work. Remember, they're enslaved, but he was able to kind of rent his family, so to say. And this man sells his family from right underneath him, the slave master. So he's like, yo, you know what? I'm not really even trusting you right now. Until Christmas Day in year 1848. And I would have gone then, but being a member of the choir, I yielded to the entreaties of my associates to assist at a concert of sacred music, which was to be got up from the benefit of the church. My friend Dr. Smith, who was the conductor of the Underground Railroad or Railway, was also a member of the choir. And when I had consented to attend, he assisted me in selecting 24 pieces to be sung on the occasion. On the day appointed to our concert, I went along with Dr. Smith, and the singing commenced at 3:30 p.m. when he had sung about 10 pieces and were engaged in singing the following verse. Again, the day, okay, he's going into the verse. Then the day returns of holy rest, which when he made the world Jehovah bless, when like his own he bade our labor cease, and all be piety and all be peace. The members were rather astonished that Dr. Smith, who stood on my right hand, suddenly closed his book, sinking down upon his seat, and his eyes being at the same time filled with tears. Several of them began to inquire what was the matter with him, but he did not tell them. I guessed what it was, and afterwards found out that I had judged of the circumstances correctly, that Dr. Smith's feelings were overcome with a sense of doing wrongly in singing for the purpose of obtaining money to assist those who were buying and selling their fellow men. He thought at the moment he felt approved by Almighty God for lending his aid in the cause of slaveholding religion, and it was under this impression he closed his book and formed the resolution, which he still acts upon, of never singing again or taking part in the services of a pro-slavery church. He is now in New England, publicly advocating the cause of emancipation. After we had sung several other pieces, we commenced the anthem, which run thus. Vital of heavenly flame, quit, oh quit the mortal frame. These words awakened in me, in which the sting of former sufferings was still fast. Okay, tell her to come. And stimulated by the example of Dr. Smith, whose feelings I read so correctly, I too made up my mind that I would be no longer guilty of assisting those bloody dealers in the bodies of souls of men. Okay, bring it. No, go with you. And ever since that time, I had steadfastly kept my resolution. I now began to get weary of my bonds. Go ahead. And earnestly panted after liberty. I felt convinced that I should be acting in accordance with the will of God if I could snap in sunder those bonds by which I was held body and soul as the property of a fellow man. I looked forward to the good time which every day I more and more firmly believed would yet come, when I should walk the face of the earth in full possession of all the freedom which the finger of God had not so clearly written on the constitution of man, and which was common to the human race, but of which by the cruel hand of tyranny I and millions of my fellow men had been robbed. I was acquainted with a storekeeper in the city of Richmond, from which from whom I used to purchase my provisions, and have informed a favorable opinion of his integrity. One day, in the course of a little conversation with him, I said to him, if I were free, I would be able to do business such as he was doing. He then told me that my occupation, a tobacconist, was a money-making one, and if I were free, I had no need to charge for another or change for another. I then told him my circumstance in regard to my master, having to pay him $25 per month, and yet that he refused to assist me in saving my wife from being sold and taken away to the South, where I should never see her again, and even refused to allow me to go and see her until my hours of labor were over. I told him this took place about 5 months ago, and I had been meditating my escape from slavery since, and asked him, as no person was near us, if he could give me information about how I should proceed. I told him I had a little money and it would assist me. I would pay him for doing so, or for so doing. The man asked me if I was not afraid to speak that way to him. I said no, for I imagined he believed that every man had a right to liberty. He said I was quite right and asked me how much money I would give him if he would assist me to get away. Everybody got a right to liberty and you got to pay me anyway. He ain't doing it out the kindness of his heart. I told him that I had $166 and that I would give him the half. So we ultimately agreed that I should have his service in the attempt of 86. Now I only wanted to fix upon a plan. He told me of several plans by which others managed to effect their escape, but none of them exactly suited my taste. I then left him to think over what would be the best to be done, and in the meantime went to consult my friend Dr. Smith on the subject. I mentioned the plans which the storekeeper had suggested, and he did not approve either of them very much. I still looked for some plan which would be more certain and more safe, but I was determined that, come what may, I should have my freedom or die in the attempt. And I think it's interesting to know I'm not usually as talkative as I usually am, but in the sake of the Muna commentary, I think it's interesting to note that everyone did not escape in the same way, their captivity or their servitude. And so, as he's saying, he went over a number of plans, but none of them was for him specifically. In this day and time, we see so many people saying, well, this is the way, and that's the way, and this is the way to liberation. And just by taking what's happening in this narrative, he's saying that there were different plans. People got to freedom in so many different ways. And also depending on what that person's idea was freedom is, how far did they want to go? Some just wanted to get to the north. Some wanted to get to Canada. Some wanted to get back to Africa. And so we always have to take this into consideration as we're talking amongst ourselves, especially in this day and time, to understand that everybody does not necessarily have the same objective. And to define your goal is very important before you start arguing about why you're going in the wrong direction. So I think that I just plucked that out, but I'll keep going. One day while I was at work and my thoughts were eagerly feasting upon the idea of freedom, I felt my soul called out to heaven to breathe a prayer to the Almighty God. I prayed fervently that he would see in secret and know the innermost desires of my heart, would lend me his aid in bursting my fetters asunder and restoring me to the possession of those rights of which men had robbed me, when the idea suddenly flashed across my mind of shutting myself up in a box and getting myself conveyed as dry goods to a free state. Being now satisfied that this was the plan for me, I went to my friend, Dr. Smith. So he was like, yo, I'm not into that running stuff. Because we read Charles Ball. What was Charles Ball again? 50 years and change, I think. And he actually, was it Charles Ball? He ran, like he went for months. I mean, he had an arduous journey They sold him all the way further to Georgia, and he tried to make it back to Maryland, only to be kidnapped again. So I'm quite sure many of our ancestors and foreparents would have heard these different stories. Like, okay, this one did it and they got there this way. This one hopped on a ferry boat and they was able to such and such. So he's like, nah. I don't know about all that running. He's like, yo, I'm gonna take an easier road. I'm gonna get there quicker. It might be a little bit more strenuous, and this is what we're gonna listen to right now. He says, and getting myself conveyed as dry goods for a free state. Being now satisfied that this was the plan for me, I went to my friend, Dr. Smith, and having acquainted him with it, we agreed to have it put at once into execution, not, however, without calculating the chances of danger with which it was attended, but buoyed up by the prospect of freedom and increased hatred to slavery, I was willing to dare even death itself rather than endure any longer for the cankling of those galling chains. It being still necessary to have the assistance of the storekeeper to see that the box was kept in its right position of its passage, I then went to let him know my intention. But he said, although he was willing to serve me in any way he did not think I could live in a box for so long a time as would be necessary to convey me to Philadelphia. No, she's not. Just go ahead. Give me 1 second, please. We got baby rumblings over here. Just give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. That's that baby business. So the shopkeeper's like, nah, I don't know about this. But as I had already made up my mind, he consented to accompany me and keep the box right all the way. My next object was to procure a box. With the assistance of the carpenter, that was very soon accomplished and taken to the place where the packing was to be performed. In the meantime, the storekeeper had written to a friend in Philadelphia, but as no answer had arrived, we resolved to carry out our own purpose as best we could. It was deemed necessary that I should get permission to be absent from my work for a few days, in order to keep down suspicion until I had once fairly started on the road to liberty, and as I had then gathered a finger. I thought that would form a very good excuse for obtaining leave of absence, but when I showed to my one overseer, or Mr. Allen, he told me it was not so bad as to prevent me from working. So with a view of making it bad enough, I got Dr. Smith to procure for me some oil of vitriol in order to drop a little on it. But in my hurry, I dropped rather much and made it worse than there was any occasion for. So like he kind of burned himself, so that he cannot have to go to work. Like, that's wild. It says, I dropped rather fat, it was very soon eaten it to the bone. And on presenting it again to Mr. Allen, I obtained the permission required. Oh man, with the advice that I should go home and get a poultice of flax meal to it and keep it well poulticed until it got better. I took him instantly at his word and went off directly to the storekeeper, who had by this time received an answer from his friend in Philadelphia, and I obtained permission to address the box to him. Where am I here? The friend in Philadelphia. Okay. I lost my space, everybody. Hold on 1 second. Okay. This friend in the city arranging to call for it as soon as it should arrive. There being no time to be lost, the storekeeper, Dr. Smith, and myself agreed to meet next morning at 4 o'clock in order to get the box ready for the express train. The box which I had procured was 3 feet 1 inch wide, 2 feet 6 inches high, 2 feet wide, and on the morning of the 29th day of March, 1849, I went into the box, having previously bored 3 gimlet holes opposite wide, and on the morning of the 29th day of March, 1849, gimlet holes opposite my face for air, and providing myself with a bladder of water, both for the purpose of quenching my thirst and for wetting my face, should I feel getting faint. I took the gimlet also with me, in order that I might bore more holes if I found I had not sufficient air, being thus equipped for the battle of liberty. My friends nailed down the lid and had me conveyed to the express office, which was about a mile distance from the place where I was packed. I had no sooner arrived at the office than I was turned heels up. Let's go down here. While some person nailed something on the end of the box, I was then put upon a wagon and driven off to the depot with my head down. And I had no sooner arrived at the depot than the man who drove the wagon tumbled me roughly into the baggage car, where, however, I happened to fall on my right side. The next place we arrived was Potomac Creek, where the baggage had to be removed from the cars to be put on board the steamers, where I was again placed with my head down, and in this dreadful position had to remain nearly an hour and a half, which from the sufferings I had thus to endure seemed like an age to me. But I was forgetting the battle of liberty, and I was resolved to conquer or die. I felt my eyes swelling as if they would burst from the sockets, and the veins of my temples were dreadfully distended with pressure of blood upon my head. In this position, I attempted to lift my hand to my face, but I had no power to move. I felt a cold sweat coming over me, which seemed to be a warning that death was about to terminate my earthly miseries. But as I feared, even though that less than slavery, I resolved to submit to the will of God, and under the influence of that impression, I lifted up my soul in prayer to the Most High, who alone was able to deliver me. He said God right there too. My prayer was soon heard, for I could hear a man saying to another that he had traveled a long way and had been standing there 2 hours, and he would like to get somewhat to sit down. So perceiving my box standing on end, he threw it down, and then two sat upon it. I was thus relieved from a state of agony which was more easily imagined than described. I could now listen to the men talking, and heard one of them asking the other what he supposed the box contained. His companion replied, he guessed it was the mail. I too thought it was a mail, but not such a mail as he supposed it to be. The next place at which he arrived was the city of Washington, where I was taken from the steamboat and again placed upon a wagon and carried to the depot right side up with care. But when the driver arrived at the depot, I heard him call for some person to help to take the box off the wagon, and someone answered him in effect that he might throw it off, but says the driver, it is marked this side up with care. So if I throw it off, I might break something. The other answered him, that sounds like mailmen today. That sounds like the delivery, the Amazon dude, just take your stuff and just fling it, even if it's say fragile. It says the other answered him that it did not matter if he broke all that was in it. The railroad company were able enough to pay for it. No sooner were these words spoken than I began to tumble from the wagon, and falling on the end where my head was, I could hear my neck give a crack as if it had been snapped asunder, and I was not completely insensible. The first thing I heard after that was some person saying, there is no room for the box, and I will have to remain and be sent through tomorrow with the luggage train. But the Most High, he had LORD, had not quite forsaken me, for in the answer to my earnest prayer, he so ordered affairs that I should not be left behind. And I now heard a man say that the box had come with the express and it must be sent on. I was then tumbled into the car with my head downward again. Hold on. But the car had not proceeded far before more luggage had to be given in. My box got shifted about and so happened to turn upon its right side. And in this position I remained until I got to Philadelphia. Of our arrival, in which place I was informed by hearing some person say, we are in port and at Philadelphia. My heart then leaped for joy, and I wondered if any person knew that such a box was there. Here it may be proper to observe that the man who had promised to accompany my box failed to do what he promised. Like, what's new? But to prevent it remaining long at the station, after its arrival, he sent a telegraphic message to his friend, and I was only 27 hours in the box, though traveling a distance of 350 miles. I was now in the depot amongst the other luggage, where I lay till 7 o'clock p.m. at which time a wagon drove up and I heard a person inquire for such a box as that in which I was. I was then placed on a wagon and conveyed to the house where my friend in Richmond had arranged I should be received. A number of persons soon collected round the box after it was taken into the house. But as I did not know what was going on, I kept myself quiet. I heard a man say, "Let us rap upon the box and see if he is alive." And immediately a rap ensued, and a voice said, trembling, "Is all right within?" To which I replied, "All right." The joy of the friends was very great. When they heard that I was alive, they soon managed to break open the box. And then came my resurrection from the grave of slavery. I rose a free man. I told you, I know we've been reading him for a minute, but I love his alliteration, man. I love the way he describes, He says, "And then came my resurrection from the grave of slavery. I rose a free man, but I was too weak by reason of long confinement in that box to be able to stand. So I immediately swooned away. After my recovery from the swoon, the first thing which arrested my attention was the presence of a number of friends, everyone seeming more anxious than other to have an opportunity of rendering me their assistance. And they used to call friends, and I'm believing right now, they used to call the Quakers friends. Or that's another name for their, a lot of people who are abolitionists. So I don't know if those, some people like friends, he don't know them, but that's what they used to call them. And I just wanted to put that in there. Everyone seeming more anxious than another to have an opportunity of rendering me their assistance and of bidding me a hearty welcome to the possession of my natural rights. I had risen, as it were, from the dead. I felt much more than I could readily express, but as the kindness of the Almighty had been so conspicuously shown in my deliverance, I burst forth into the following hymn of thanksgiving. I waited patiently for the, I can't say Lord, I don't guess, so I'm going to say the Most High, for those who are reading it along with me. I waited patiently for the Most High, for the Creator, and he inclined unto me and heard my calling. I waited patiently for the Most High, and he inclined unto me and heard my calling, and he hath put a new song in my mouth, even a thanksgiving, even a thanksgiving, even a thanksgiving unto our power. Blessed, blessed, blessed is the man, blessed is the man, blessed is the man that hath set his hope in the Creator. My power, great, great, great. This is his song of joy that he brings forth. Great. Oh, he's not done yet. My bad. If I was him, I wouldn't be either. He's going in for another verse. He got another bar. Hold on. Great are the wondrous works which you have done. Great are the wondrous works which you have done, If I should declare them and speak of them, they would be more than I'm able to express. I have not kept back your loving kindness and truth from your great congregation. I have not kept back your loving kindness and truth from your great congregation. Withdraw not your mercy from me. Withdraw not your mercy from me, O Most High. Let your loving kindness and your truth always preserve me. Let all those that seek thee be joyful and glad. Let all those that seek me be joyful and glad, be joyful and glad, be joyful and glad, be joyful, be joyful, be joyful, be joyful, be joyful and glad, be glad in thee. And let such as love your salvation, say always, the Most High be praised, the Most High be praised. Let all those that seek thee be joyful and glad. And let such as love your salvation say always, the Most High be praised, the Most High be praised, the Most High be praised. I mean, come on, how we gonna forget these words? How we gonna forget these words? If we don't dust off these narratives and go into these spaces and understand. Anyway, before I get on my soapbox, let me finish up Henry Blocks Brown. Page 59. I was then taken by the hand and welcomed to the houses of the following friends: Mr. J. Miller, Mr. McKim, Mr. and Mrs. Molt, Mr. and Mrs. Davis, and many others, by all whom I was treated in the kindest manner possible. But it was thought proper that I should not remain long in Philadelphia, so arrangements were made for me to proceed to Massachusetts, where by the assistance of a few anti-slavery friends, I was enabled shortly after to arrive. I went to New York, where I became acquainted with Mr. H. Long and Mr. Eli Smith, who were very kind to me the whole time I remained there. My next journey was to New Bedford, which I remained some weeks under the care of Mr. H. Ricketson. My finger being still bad for the effects of the oil of vitriol, which I dressed it before I left Richmond. While I was here, I heard of a great anti-slavery meeting which is to take place in Boston. And being anxious to identify myself with that public movement, I proceeded there and had the pleasure of meeting the hearty sympathy of thousands to whom I related the story of my escape. Because by this time, the abolitionist movement is at as a height. You understand? I have since attended large meetings in different towns in the states of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. One second. He says, Pennsylvania and New York, in all of which places I have found my friends and have endeavored, according to the best of my abilities, to advocate the cause of the emancipation of the slave. With what success I will not pretend to say, but with a daily increasing confidence in the humanity and justice of my cause, and in the assurance of the approbation of the Almighty, I have composed the following song in commemoration of my feat in the box. And he has a song of which I'm going to read, or I don't even know his vibe, but I'm going to try to flow on it. Here you see a man by the name of Henry Brown, ran away from the South to the North, which he would not have done, but they stole all his rights, but they'll never do the like again. Chorus, Brown laid down the shovel and the hoe, down in the box he did go. No more slave work for Henry Box Brown, in the box by express he did go. Second stanza. Then the orders they were given, and the cars did start away. Roll along, roll along, roll along, down to the landing where the steamboat lay, to bear the baggage off to the north. When they packed the baggage on, they turned him on his head. There poor Brown like to have died. There was passengers on board who wished to sit down, and they turned the box down on its side. And then you bust into chorus again. And they got to the cars, they threw the box off, and down upon his head he did fall. Then he heard his neck crack, and he thought it was broke, but they never threw him off anymore. Chorus again. And when they got to Philadelphia, they said he was in port, and Brown then began to feel glad. He was taken on the wagon to his final destination and left this side up with care. The friends gathered round and asked if it was all right, as down on the box they did rap. Brown answered them, saying, yes, all is right. He was then set free from his pain. And he goes into chorus. So he wrote his own song. And I'm going to go into the appendix right now. That's the narrative of Henry Box Brown. And I'm going to read, hold up, the latter portion of this. And then, sorry for the delay, but we will finally be finished, Henry Box Brown. It says, the allusion in my song to the shovel and the hoe is founded on the following story, which forms the slaveholders' version of the creation of the human race. The slaveholders say, oh, wow, this is interesting. Take notes. Let's hear what the slaveholders used to say. The slaveholders say that originally there were 4 persons created instead of only 2. And perhaps it is owing to the Christian account of the origin of man, in which account 2 persons are only mentioned. That is one of the doctrines of slaveholders, that slaves have no souls. However, these 4 persons were 2 whites and 2 blacks, and the blacks were made to wait upon the white. Yo, did they have their own remix? Somebody help me. But in man's original state, when he neither required to manufacture clothes to cover his nakedness or to shelter him from the storm, when he did not require to till the earth or to sow or to reap its fruits for his support, but when everything sprung up spontaneously, when the shady bower invited him to rest and loaded trees dropped their luscious burdens into his hands. In this state of things, the white pair was plagued with incessant attendance of the 2 colored persons, and they prayed that God would find them something else to do. And immediately, while they stood, a black cloud seemed to gather over their heads and descend to the earth before them. While they gazed on these clouds, they saw them open, and 2 bags of different size dropped from them. They immediately ran to lay hold on the bags, and unfortunately for the black men, he being the strongest and swiftest, he arrived first at them and laid hold of the bag, and the white man coming up after got the smaller. They then proceeded to unite their bag or untie their bags, when lo, in the large one there was a shovel and a hoe, and in the small one a pen, ink, paper. You know what? According to what he's saying, this is the story that the slave masters used to tell. This is very interesting, but I'll hold my thought. He says, to write the declaration of the intention of the Almighty, they each proceeded to employ the instruments which God had sent them. And ever since, the colored race had to labor with the shovel and the hoe, while the rich man works with the pen and the ink. Meditate on that. Because in stories, in narratives, people tell on their self. But I'll continue. I have no apology whatever to make for what I have said in regard to the pretended Christianity under which I was trained while I slaved. I have felt it my duty to speak of it harshly because I have felt its blasting influence and seen it used as a cloak under which to conceal the most foul and wicked deeds. Indeed, the only thing I think necessary to say in this place is what seems to me and what may really be matter of serious doubt to persons who have the privilege of living in a free country under the influence of liberal institutions, that there actually does exist in that land where men, women, and children are bought and sold, a church calling itself the Church of Christ. Yes, my friends, it is true that the buyer and seller of the bodies and souls of his fellows, he who today can separate the husband from the wife, the parent from the child, or cut asunder the strongest ties of friendship in order to gain a few dollars, to avert a trifling loss, or to please a whim of fancy, can ascend a pulpit tomorrow and preach what he calls the gospel of Christ. Yes, in many cases, the house, which he calls the house of God, have been erected from the price of human beings. The very stones of which it is composed have actually been dragged to their places by men with chains on their heels and ropes about their neck. It is not for me to judge between those men and God whom they pretend to serve, and their own conscience do not condemn them. If their own conscience do not condemn them, I pray that God might give them light to see the error of their ways, and if they know that they are doing wrongly, that he may give them grace to renovate their hearts. A few specimens of law of a slaveholding people may not be out of place here. Not that by such means we can hope to convey a true idea of the actual condition of people of these places, because those matter of which the happiness or misery of people principally depend, and in general such matters as are entirely beyond the reach of law. Beside the various circumstances which, independent of law, in civilized and free countries, constitute the principal sources of happiness or misery. In the slaveholding states of America, there is a strong current of public opinion which the law is altogether incompetent to control. In many cases, there are ideas of criminality which are not by statute law attached to the commission of certain acts, but which are frequently, hold on one second, this is the appendix here, which are frequently found to exist under the title of lynch law, either augmenting the punishment which the law requires or awarding punishment to what the law does not recognize as crime, as the following will be sufficient to show. I got to look that up. But it says the letter of law would have been sufficient for the protection of lives of the miserable gamblers in Vicksburg and other places in Mississippi, for the range of those whose money they had won. But gentlemen of property and standing laughed the law to scorn, rushed to the gambler's house, put ropes around their necks, dragged them through the streets, hanged them in the public square, and thus saved the money they had not yet been paid. Thousands witnessed this wholesome murder, yet of the scores of legal officers present, not one raised a finger to prevent it. How many hundreds of them helped to commit the murder with their own hand does not appear, but many of them have been indicted for it, and no one has made the least effort to bring them to trial. Now the laws of Mississippi were not in fault when those men were murdered, nor were they in fault that the murders were not punished. The law demanded it, but the people of Mississippi, the legal officers, the grand jurors, and legislator of the state, with one consent determined that the law should be a dead letter. And thus the whole state assumes the guilt of these murderers in the bravado flourish their reeking hands in the face of the world. For the people of Vicksburg have actually erected a monument in honor of Dr. H.S. Bodley, who was the ringleader of the lynchers in this case. Don't you, the verbiage, the words that he's using, the injustice. This is what, 1848. We're in 2016, and he's speaking of the same things as it relates to those who uphold the quote unquote law. I'm gonna continue. We're almost done here. It may be also worthy of remark that in all cases in which we have strong manifestation of public opinion in opposition to the law, it is always exhibited in the direction of cruelty. Just like today, we're seeing the same conversation. Indeed, that such should be the case. No person intimately acquainted with the nature of the human mind need to be in the least surprised. Let me read that again. It may also be worthy of remark that in all cases in which we have strong manifestation of public opinion, today, racism, brutality, all that we're experiencing at this very moment, he says, in opposition to the law, what we think is law, what we think should not be the case, and rightfully show it shouldn't be the case, he's saying it is also exhibited in the direction of cruelty. Indeed, that such should be the case. No person intimately acquainted with the nature of the human mind need be in the least bit surprised. Who can consider the influence which the relationship of master and slave, so extensively subsisting between the members of slave states, in stimulating the passion and in degrading the moral feelings without being prepared to credit all that it is said of slavery? The most perfect abstract of the law which regulates the duties of slave and slaveholders most doubtless fail to convey any proper idea of the actual state of the slave. And the few laws which we here cite are not given for that purpose, but as sample of trash which is called justice by slaveholders and quasi-legal authorities. Quote, all Negroes, mulattoes, or meritos who now are or shall hereafter be in this province, and all their offspring are hereby declared to be and shall remain forever hereafter absolute slaves, and shall follow the condition of the mother law of South Carolina. Remember, it was just an act to say that you are no longer 3/5, not law, just act. But what I just read, what he's quoting, and this was all over during that time, that if your mother was a slave, I said it many times, but I'm gonna continue. The criminal offense of assault and battery cannot at common law be committed upon the person of a slave. Let me go. Yo, this is why we had to read Henry Box. Nothing ever happened before the time. I know we took real long to read Henry Box Brown, but hear what this blast from the past is saying to you. The criminal offense of assault and battery cannot at common law be committed upon the person of a slave. Meaning all of this beating you're saying in their mind, you can't, there was laws on the books, you don't get charged for killing a slave. There were laws to protect slave masters, that if they killed their slave, they don't get charged. According to Henry Box Brown, he's saying the criminal offense of assault and battery cannot at common law be committed upon the person of a slave, for notwithstanding for some purposes, a slave is regarded in law as a person, yet generally he is mere chattel personnel, and his right of personal protection belongs to his master, who can maintain an action of trespass for the battery of his slave. There can be, therefore, no offense against the state for a mere beating of a slave unaccompanied by any circumstances of cruelty or any attempt to kill and murder. These are slave laws. He says the peace of the state is not thereby broken, for a slave is not generally regarded as legally capable of being within the pale of the state. And now he capitalizes this. He says, capital, he is not a citizen and is not in the character entitled to her protection. End quote, all capitals, not Imuna, Henry Box Brown, blast from the past. Any person may lawfully kill a slave who has been outlawed for running away and lurking in swamps. Law of North Carolina. Quote, a slave endeavoring to entice another slave to run away, if provision be prepared for the purpose of aiding in such running away, shall be punished with death, and a slave who shall aid the slave shall so endeavoring run away shall also suffer death. Law of South Carolina. If a slave, when absent from his plantation, refused to be examined by any white person, no matter what the moral character of such person, I saw something like that today. Give me your ID. I don't have to give you an ID. Give me an ID. You cannot. I'll read it again. If a slave, when absent from his plantation, like, what are you doing out here? Why are you riding your bike? Why are you chilling on the corner? Refused to be examined by any white person, no matter what the moral character of such white person, or for what purpose he wishes to make the examination, such white person may chastise him, and if in resistance his chastisement, he should strike the white person by whom he is being chastised, he may be killed. Law of South Carolina. I just saw a video like that today, where they actually ran up on the dude. He's like, why do you want my young boy? Why do you want my ID? And then she called for backup, of which they came to try to choke him out and arrest him. Sounds pretty familiar. Maybe somebody forget and it wasn't them. Maybe it's our people who have forgotten what our foreparents have been trying to tell us. If any slave shall presume to strike any white person, provided such striking be done by the command and in defense of the property of the owner, such slave shall, upon trial and conviction, before the justices or justices, suffer such punishment for the first offense as they shall think fit, not extended to life or limb, and for the second offense, death. Law of Georgia. Quote, if any person cut any chain or collar which any master of slaves has put upon his slave to prevent such a slave from running away, such person will be liable to penalty not exceeding $1,000 and imprisonment not exceeding 2 years. Okay, listen, if any person cut any chain or collar, if any person alter their driver's license, if any person alter their social security card, if any person alters any documents that you have gotten, what do you get? Because here it says, if you change what your master put on you, then you get a penalty of $1,000 or imprisonment for up to 2 years. Sounds very familiar. Quote, if any person cut out the tongue, put out the eye, cruelly burn or deprive any slave of a limb, he shall be liable to penalty not exceeding $500. If a slave be attacked by any person not having sufficient cause for doing so, and be maimed or disabled, so that the owner, let's go back, because I love when he puts it in all caps. If a slave be attacked by any person not having sufficient cause for so doing, and he be maimed or disabled, so that the owner suffers a loss for his inability to labor, the person so doing shall pay the master of such disabled slave for the time such slave shall be off work, and for the medical attendance of the slave. Law of South Carolina. Lastly, miscellaneous. If more than 7 slaves be found together, does this sound familiar? And keep in mind that the language has not really changed. They said they gave you some language in their amendment to say certain things, but the behavior is still showing us that the thought process is what it is. I couldn't imagine if, yeah, they're speaking up today, Tish. This is perfect time that we're reading this at this time. The Most High made it so that we will be reading it in the right time, and like nothing ever happens before the time. And like I said, some crazy stuff happened last week. No, after I read the last chapter, the 3rd installment, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read today. And this, I didn't, like I said, I didn't read ahead, and I agree. The Most High knows, because this is perfect timing for us to understand that nothing has changed in the mentality of the people in which we are dwelling. The mentality is, this is why you see so many people on social media saying, you know, no conviction, no conviction, no conviction. Why? Because of these laws that they're still upholding, but we're just deluded. Some of these laws that the mentality is this individual, although they're not physically saying it or verbally calling you a slave, the action is that of, this is what a master has the right to do to a slave with no recourse. You don't have any recourse. Maybe you'll cry in the street, maybe you'll march, but the reality is nobody's coming to bat for you. And we're seeing this. I'm not saying this. Henry Box Brown is saying it. Lastly, if more than 7 slaves be found together in any road without a white person, they shall be liable to 20 lashes each. Does that look familiar? Why are you hanging out on the street corner? Why are you standing here? Why are you talking together? And we talk about, why can't you come together? There's laws that if I don't agree with what it is that you're doing, and I did not give permission, then you cannot come together. If any slave visit a plantation other than that of his master without a written pass, he shall receive he'll be liable to 10 lashes. Very nice.
Mommy, can my dog.
Okay, wait, mommy's coming.
If my dog was made the princess cape on my dog.
That's nice, baby. If a slave let loose a boat from where it has been made fast, he shall for the first offense be liable to a penalty of 39 lashes, and to the second to have one ear cut from his head. For being on horseback without written permission from his master, 25 lashes. For riding or going abroad at night without a written permission, or a slave may be cropped or branded in the cheek with the letter E, or otherwise punished, not extending to life, or so as to render him unfit for labor. Signing off, Henry Box Brown. I know it took us a while, but as I just said, and Sister Tish said, it came at the absolute right time for us to have a reminder that there's nothing new under the sun. And the minute we forget, that's when you see, that's why I said, I'm not very reactionary at this time. And that understanding our history, the history of this country, the history of our foreparents in diaspora will give, like, they never forgot, but they left it on record for us. In the narrative that he gives of this European retelling the story of Genesis, what they're telling you is, hey, we'll pimp you out and we will write the history. We will write the narratives. We will control the minds through the pen, because again, they say the pen is mightier than the sword. So the thought is, I'll exact your labor, but as long as I write the laws and enforce them, hey, I'm in power and I'm in control. This is why literacy was taken away from you. This is why I say it's so very important for us to delve deeper into these spaces. To delve deeper into these spaces of literacy. For us to remember these stories that were left on record at a time where many people didn't know how to read and write. Not because they didn't want to, but because it was illegal. And so coming out of slavery and coming out of this place, he was ingenious. Again, this is one of the famous stories of the Underground Railroad, Henry Box Brown. And I want to thank everybody for collectively sharing in this narrative, for us taking this time to remember one of our foreparents, Henry Box Brown, who, according to those who enslaved him, black people are dumb and black people are slow and blah, 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 all of this stuff like this. But apparently he wasn't that dumb and he wasn't that slow for him to say, you know what? I'm about to express I'm not even, he's like, yo, forget that. I'm not running. You're going to take me to freedom. And that's literally what they did. They used their strength and their energy to lift him from where he was and put him to where he wanted to be. Now that's something for us to meditate on. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and sticking with us. This is, I don't know how many narratives this is right now. We're definitely going to start up a next one. Most I willing next week. Some things have quieted down for me here in the summertime. So definitely we'll be able to bust through some of these narratives. So again, we could put that one in the box, so to say. But tell somebody you know. Again, we're reading from docsouth.unc.edu. It has a number, I mean, a whole lot of scanned text as it relates to these narratives. Share this story. Share the Left Project. Tell somebody about Henry Box Brown. And like I said, as we're listening to this, understand that just thinking you're going to scoop everybody together and it's going to be all one thing and without, history repeats or bears out, it may not go that way. Again, so many people have arrived. We saw someone ran to freedom. He mailed himself to freedom. Incidents in the life of a slave girl, her name escapes me, Harriet Jacobs. She waited 6 years, almost 7 years before she even had the opportunity to freedom. So everybody's goal was freedom, but again, how they got there, how long it took, what course they took, where they were when they actually started. It was easier to get from freedom from Maryland than it was from Georgia. Somebody may be further back than you are, and you may be saying, hey, it's easy. Once we get across DC, we in the north. But for somebody else who's in Mississippi, that might be a different story for them. And so, we have to be able to broaden our perspective on how we relate to one another, and how we say things like, it's so easy, it's not that hard, all you have to do is, because it creates more of a distance, especially because we're not taking the time to see what each other may be. It may be easier for somebody to move with one child than it is for somebody to move with 8 children. You understand what I'm saying? And so again, thank you for tuning in. I'm not even going to stay long today because I'm still in my meditation mode. But once again, this is Amuna Yisrael, Soul Anonymous 101. There was something that popped up that I wanted to read, but I'm going to see which one we're going to read next. And if anyone wants to participate in the Left Project, just shoot me an email. If you want to read, if you want to be on the other side of the screen, all you got to do is send an email or leave a comment under the box, and then we can have that and make it happen. So until next time, I pray everybody have a blessed night. And hey, man, like I said, you don't necessarily got to stay cool, because you got to process your thoughts, your feelings, and emotions. But understand the words that we profess, we have to be careful, because we are spiritual people. And so even in our anger, we have to be careful for the vibration that we put out, because it may come back at unsuspected times. And we may think that someone else is doing certain things to us, but we forgot that we actually profess these things. So let us be wise in this day and time, and continue to navigate these very treacherous waters, and may the Most High deliver us, as Henry Box Brown song narrated, that he narrated onto us, and may the Most High continue to remember us. So until next time, one.